Okay, welcome back to Close Enough Garage. It's good to have you with me again. Today we're going to be going over one of the systems on the lowrider Shadow that I built. Give you an up-close look at the air ride system on that. Go over some of the basics of installing a very simple system like this, and then we're going to go ahead and upgrade the hoses on it as well. I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you how it all works here in just a moment. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so what we have here is actually a very simple system. You have front and rear. Now inside of this E-tank is where all of your usual relays, fuses, connections, even the ECM for this bike is all stored in there because it kind of helps clean it up and it gives me plenty of room for the air ride. I do have the regulator rectifier right there stored up underneath of there to give me some better airflow to it. Those do run really hot. And then down on the swing arm we have the air ride manifold. Now this line here is one of the two exhaust lines. There's another one right there. This goes out to the front. This hole goes out to the rear. Now as you can see, I've kind of cheated a little bit and gone ahead and taken quite a bit of it apart ahead of time. So we're going to get into that. As I said, your relays are in here. So you hit the switch, it flips a relay. It tells that manifold to open the correct channel. And it tells that compressor hiding down there to fire. And it starts popping air in through the manifold. And depending on which switch, or if you have both switches pressed, it will start raising up the rear bags and the front forks. Now on the back here, I've got some heavy duty bolts, and they are on spacers to ensure clearance of the airbags from the frame, because once they start to drop, these airbags will puff out just a little bit as the material, as the material compresses. So I want to keep it away from the edge of the swing arm there. The swing arm on this bike has also been extended 3 inches because when it's out of storage mode and it's a running working vehicle, the bike actually sits all the way on the ground to park. There's no kickstand for it. And then when you hit the switches to air it up, it goes up about 4.5, 5 inches of clearance, actually pretty close to where it's at right now. So it's very rideable. It is a rough ride, but that's fine. It looks good, and it was never meant to be a daily rider. So we're going to go ahead and go over a little bit more about the suspension and the install, and then go ahead and upgrade those lines. Back over here in the chair, I'm going to give you a rundown on why I'm upgrading the lines. If it was a functioning working system, why you would go back through and do that. The problem I have is that on this setup, it's a tankless setup. And what that means is there's basically, just like your average air compressor, air ride works the same way. A lot of guys will run a tank setup, that's the most common way, and that air compressor will feed through the manifold and then into a storage tank that will hold high pressure air, and then that way it's available for you on demand. I'm not dropping the bike on the highway to throw sparks. I'm not showing off anywhere else, so really all I need is for it to go up when I'm ready to ride and down when I'm ready to park. So I'm not running a tank. In that instance, your air lines and your suspension itself actually becomes your tank. The problem I'm having is I'm running this very small line. If we can get a focus on that, it's tiny. It's 4mm line there, and the way you can think about it is, you get a series of different tubes. Let's say you have a coffee stirrer, you have like a McDonald's straw, and then you have a paper towel tube. All right, you think of your line as those tubes. You put it up to your mouth, you blow through the coffee stirrer, you're going to get a small amount of air, and it's going to work, but it's not going to work that great. This is the coffee stirrer. Now, in comparison, we have the 1/4 inch line. That's going to be your McDonald's straw. That's going to let you get a lot more air through the same area because it's a larger passageway. And in doing so, I'm hoping to get a little bit of a reduction in the amount of time that it takes the bike to pump up, because right now it exhausts the air very well, but coming up, it's very slow. It takes about 30 seconds to get all the way up to full ride height. I'd be much happier around 10 or 15 seconds. Now, on the other end, we can go ahead and run hose for a compressor, and that's going to be your paper towel tube. You're going to blow through that all day and you're not going to get very much done. It's going to be more air than the compressor can put out, just the way that the paper towel tube would be more air than your lungs could put out. You could think of that compressor as your lungs, is what I'm saying. So, to get this done right, hopefully get a little bit faster up and a little bit stronger hold on the air, we're going to go ahead and upgrade the line size. And it was my first ever air ride setup, so I was running some pretty cheap fittings, and I think I was getting some leaks around the collars. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the fitting size as well. Or not the fitting size, I'm sorry, the fitting quality. And hopefully have a little bit less leaks there. And I'm also going to change the shape, get some bent fittings, so that way I'm not presenting such a loop coming out of the connections, and therefore another place that could potentially leak easier. So really, we're just going to speed up the system and find a way to help bulletproof it a little bit more. Before I do get started on this, I want to say that, as a disclaimer, this is me, this is my private bike in my private garage. I do not condone you using anybody but a professional to do this, because it's suspension shit, and if you screw it up and the bike drops its suspension going down the road at highway speeds, you could very easily get yourself killed. I don't want that on my conscience, so whether you do it or not, I don't actually give a shit, but I'm going to tell you not to. So that way I can get a little bit of sleep at night, the very little bit that I do to begin with. Alright, let's get into getting these lines cut up and fitted, and I'll show you about the fittings and the sealant as well. Alright, so on the suspension side of things here, we actually have these stock Honda Shadow forks. These are usually fluid-filled forks. Now they have been converted to air ride, and the way I did that was actually I took both forks off and dumped out all of the shock fluid, threw the springs away, the spacers, and then American Racing is a company that makes air ride parts, and they make a drop-in that fits right in here in these 41 millimeter tubes. I believe the number is AR70-41. Yeah, you take this top cap off, drop the piston straight into the empty tube, put a little bit of fluid in there so that way it's got some cushion, and then that's all you need to do on that end. Come back, use your drill press, drill a starter hole, and then drill your size hole and tap it for whatever pipe thread fitting you're going to use. I'm running 1/8 NPT on here, and that for a motorcycle, that's going to be about all you really need. Once you get that drilled and tapped in, go ahead and run some sealant tape around the threads and then tighten that in as you normally would. Then your air fitting will go into there. It'll go into an air line, which I've usually got hidden along that backbone there. That air line is right here, right now. And then the air line goes down to the manifold, and it does all its job. Now on the back, I've got these spaced out, as I said before, for clearance. These are just basic Harley bags. And once again, you have one in and out there, so when it pumps it up, pushes air in, inflates the bags, lifts the bike up. When you drop the air comes back out there, goes into the manifold, and then out that exhaust channel there, and it, with all the air pressure out, it lowers again and it parks the bike. If you search through my videos, I do have a YouTube short showing that happening. Look at that paint, man. Look at that flake. I love that. There's real gold leaf there too. That's my first time ever laying leaf. But anyway, back to what really matters, huh? Alright, so once again, we're back at the work desk here. This is that little tiny 4mm line. Now I know it's been focused on. You can see how small that is. And you can see how small the fittings are. You're not pushing a lot of air through that at all. What we're going to move up to, as mentioned before, is a 1/4 inch line. A lot bigger, a lot beefier fitting, just better airflow altogether. Now, one trick is when you go to cut this shit, you don't want to use your pocket knife or a pair of scissors or anything like that. They are going to give you an airline cutter. And if you don't have one, if your kit doesn't come with one, these are really cheap. But what's important is you don't leave that angled end on it. For the best sealing in your system possible, go ahead, I'm going to try to do this very awkwardly. Get your line straight across there. You see it's perpendicular. Go ahead, press down. Now what that's going to do is it's going to give you the flattest edge you could possibly have. A brand new edge as well. And that flat edge is going to seal better than one that's at an angle. Along with that, for better sealing, a lot of the better fittings will come with a white sealant anyway. I like to go ahead and double up my insurance and wrap it with white sealant tape as well. The only thing you got to watch with that is where your end line is. Where is mine? I can't find it because I did a good job of wrapping this. You want to make sure where your tape ends isn't going to be against the direction that you're turning. So if you want, for tightening it, you want your tape end to be going around that way, because in that way when you go ahead and you put it in on tightening mode, it doesn't just rip all that tape off. It actually feeds it into the threads and it keeps it all nice and sealed up in there. Now, along with upgrading these fittings, obviously I've got the T's. I'm combining both rear shocks, one on each side, into one line, and one line going to the manifold. And then same thing for the front, just a different shape. There's both of the fronts right there, and then that's the line to the manifold. So we'll go ahead and get this done. Not much really to it. Go ahead and screw those into your fittings and then run your lines. Alright, one thing I didn't show, and I probably should have, is introducing a line to these fittings. It is extremely easy. You got your line, flat cut, you got your fitting, empty hole. Go ahead, slide it in carefully, one click, and then it pushes in a bit further, and you'll see the locking collar kind of compresses. Go ahead and give it a little bit of a pull. Now the locking collar is all the way out. Now, if for some reason you do have to take these back apart to replace a line or anything else, you go ahead, grab it, push that locking collar in, and pull the line straight out. It is that easy. Once again, collar in, line out. These are very, very user-friendly. There's not a whole lot you can really screw up on these ones. Alright, beautiful. So we've got the rear air line in. I want to show you before I make the last connection. We got pressed into here, press tight, pull a little bit. Now, I'm just using cable ties on the junction for right now. Once I'm settled that this will become my permanent install, go ahead and zip a couple of screws down in there and get that fastened the right way. Now, I do have an excess amount of line here, and that's fine as long as it's not hanging on anything dangerous. And the reason for that is because when you make things air ride, it all becomes moving objects. So, swing arm, frame move separately from each other, and then you've got the manifold mounted to the frame, and then the suspension over here. So I always leave a loop. I leave a loop in my battery as well, because the location it actually sits is almost impossible to see, let alone get to. That box right there, right down in between the swing arm and the frame, is where my lithium battery sits. So anytime you're working on stuff like that. You go ahead and leave a little bit of loop for motion and safety. Now, if we can focus. That's close enough. Same thing as installing the junction. You get your fitting gathered in there. Go ahead, 2 clicks, give it a little tug, and there you go. Now these elbowed fittings also provide another point of safety because they will move with the demands of the air hose. Now we're going to do the same thing. The only difference is we're going to run from this air line here to that fitting. We're going to pull this fitting off, put a 1/4 incher in there, run the air line back up the frame along the backbone, fasten it in, and we're going to put elbow fittings in there as well. So that pretty much sums it up for upgrading the air lines and how the air ride system on my particular bike works. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the comments down there. Aside from that, thank you once again for tuning in, listening to me ramble on. Hopefully I can help somebody out there learn something and be a little bit smarter in their own garage. We will be doing a startup video, and I'll be putting the battery back in this lowrider probably in a month and a half. We're Northeast Ohio here, so I want to wait until we have consistent 50-degree or warmer days, or nights rather, and then I'll go ahead and put the battery in, because this bike isn't going to get ran very often. So if it's going to be sitting, I don't want to be sitting when it's cold. That's really all there is to it. All right, take care. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell your friends. Help me grow, help me go somewhere with this. I really appreciate the support I've gotten so far, and I appreciate every single view and every single one of y'all. You have a good night and be safe out there, all right?